Chapter 2669. After seeing Yu Siqing's performance, Lan Qinyan and the rest, who were originally full of confidence, couldn't help but change their expressions. Bailey Hongzhuang's performance was too confident. On the contrary, Yu Siqing appeared to be a little guilty. If this poison was really cured by Yu Siqing, logically speaking, Yu Siqing shouldn't be so guilty. In reality, regarding the sudden cure of the poison, Lan Qinyan and Lan Jingquang had some doubts in their hearts. Previously, Yu Siqing had always acted as if she couldn't do anything about this poison. They had even lost all hope. However, at this time, Yu Siqing had suddenly cured Lan Qinyan of the poison. Without any warning, it was just that sudden. Although they felt it was very strange at the time, they couldn't think of any other reason other than Yu Siqing's explanation and didn't think much about it. However, after hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, they couldn't help but start to question it. If Yu Siqing could really cure Lan Qinyan of the poison, she should have been immensely proud of herself. How could she have done it so quietly? However, in this situation, they would rather believe that Yu Siqing was telling the truth than Bailey Hongzhuang. So what if it's a coincidence? There are so many coincidences in this world. Everything is just a coincidence. Yu Siqing stared coldly at Bailey Hongzhuang. She had already made up her mind. No matter what, she was the one who cured this poison. As long as she didn't admit it, Bailey Hongzhuang wouldn't be able to prove her innocence. With Yu Siqing's reputation in the Shengxian continent, it was needless to say that everyone would believe her. Seeing Yu Siqing's confidence, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled. Since that's the case, I have a very simple way to prove who's right. I wonder if you dare to give it a try? Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's confident look, Yu Siqing had a bad feeling in her heart. However, the arrow was already knocked on the bow. If she hesitated, she would also lose. Speak. Unfortunately, I have an identical poison here. I can find anyone to consume it now. Since you can detoxify the poison, why don't you detoxify it again? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Yu Siqing mockingly. From the fact that Yu Siqing was unable to detoxify the poison within 3 months, she had already concluded that Yu Siqing was unable to detoxify the poison. She came here today to confront the Lan family, and on the other hand, she didn't mind giving Yu Siqing a tight slap. Looking at Yu Siqing's face that had turned the color of pig liver, Bailey Hongzhuang found it funny. Yu Siqing had thought highly of herself for so many years. This slap was probably enough to make Yu Siqing suffer. Yu Siqing didn't know how to react to Bailey Hongzhuang's suggestion. She thought that Bailey Hongzhuang had gotten the poison by chance. She didn't expect that Bailey Hongzhuang not only knew the effects of this poison, but also had the same poison. As a result, she was now riding a tiger and unable to get off. Because of Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the originally aggressive Yu Siqing had turned into a mute. Even the stupidest people present understood the situation. The result is already very clear. I believe that I don't need to say anything more, right? Chapter 2670. As Bailey Hongzhuang's voice fell, the faces of Lan Jingquang and the others became a bit awkward. Originally, they were full of confidence, but now they were being checkmated. However, this was something that they had never thought of. In a moment, everyone looked at Yu Siqing with disgust. Who would have thought that Yu Siqing would do such a thing to take all the credit for herself? In these 2 days, Yu Siqing had been acting extremely arrogant, as if she was the benefactor of the Lan family. However, all of this was fake, and Yu Siqing was enjoying it with a clear conscience. She was too shameless. Lan Jingquang's face was as gloomy as water. He looked at Yu Siqing with eyes filled with anger. If it was only the Lan family who found out, then so be it. However, she was exposed in front of everyone. Even if they didn't know, in the eyes of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, they would think that they were in cahoots. This was no different from bringing shame to the entire Lan family. Yu Siqing naturally knew that being exposed like this was extremely shameful. She also didn't think that there would be a day when she would be exposed. This Bailey Hongzhuang was young, but her words and actions were watertight. It seemed that the other party came prepared. Perhaps, when she said that she was the one who cured Lan Qinyan, this Bailey Hongzhuang already had a plan. However, looking at the magnificent Bailey Hongzhuang in front of her, Yu Siqing felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity, as if she had seen her somewhere before. This figure was vaguely familiar, but she couldn't remember when she had seen it before. But she couldn't deny that she, Yu Siqing, had fallen into a trap today. The three of us came from afar as guests of the Lan family. We didn't think that the Lan family would frame us. If you don't welcome us, just say so. Why do you have to do such a thing? Di Baichen curved his sexy lip. His handsome face was bloodthirsty and stern. It was clearly a rhetorical question, but one could hear the threat and anger in it. If it were just three ordinary young people, Lan Jingquang and the others could ignore them. However, these three people's identities couldn't be underestimated. If they didn't do something right, the Lan family would suffer unbearable revenge. Even if your poison didn't kill me, the pain I've suffered for the past 3 months was caused by you. Isn't that too much? Lan Qinyan glared at Bailey Hongzhuang. In such a short period of time, she had cast all of this aside. To her, these 3 months of pain was the most unbearable. Ah! Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled, her phoenix eyes slightly raised, a bright light blooming in her eyes. Her voice instantly became cold and low. Lan Qinyan, you haven't been living in your dreams since you were young? Everyone knew that it was normal to lose one's life in the Battle of Zhuolu. If I had fallen into your hands, I would have been dead by now. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame yourself for not having the ability. The fact that I didn't kill you with my poison is already giving face to the Lan family. Even if I had poisoned you, what can you do now? If the entire Lan family only uses this reason to question me, once this news gets out, it will be a laughing stock. Chapter 26:71. Bailey Hongzhuang's words were like cannonballs exploding, and Lan Qingyan's originally aggressive attitude gradually turned into a guilty conscience. Because what Bailey Hongzhuang said was the basic rule of the Shengxian continent. Many cultivators had died in the Battle of Zhuolu. If Bailey Hongzhuang had killed her in the Battle of Zhuolu, the Lan family could only find another reason to pursue the matter. The problem was, would Limitless Palace, who was also a first-rate power, be afraid? Bailey Hongzhuang didn't poison her and only tortured her. As long as this news spread out, reason would be on Bailey Hongzhuang's side. Their Lan family was in the wrong. Lan Qingyan's red lips parted slightly, as if someone had grabbed her throat, but she couldn't say a single word. I don't care if you really didn't know, but you slandered me. This is the truth. The illustrious Lan family, don't tell me you don't want to admit it just because you have more people? Bailey Hongzhuang crossed her arms in front of her chest and calmly looked at the Lan family's upper echelons. She had the aura of someone who wouldn't panic even if MT Tai collapsed in front of her. Di Baichen and Mo Yunjue stood beside Bailey Hongzhuang without saying a word. Just their actions showed their attitude. This time, the Lan family was in the wrong. If they didn't apologize, they wouldn't let this matter go. Seeing this, Lan Kaiqing and the other elders couldn't help but look at Lan Jingquang. This matter was completely led by Lan Jingquang. Now that things had developed to this point, it was completely out of their expectations. As for what to do, it was up to Lan Jingquang to decide. Lan Jingquang's head drooped slightly, his face as gloomy as water. That shadow covered his eyes, making it impossible for others to see through his thoughts. He originally wanted to use this feast of Hongmen to dampen Bailey Hongzhuang's momentum. He didn't expect to go for wool and come home shorn. Now, Bailey Hongzhuang had a handle on him. If they apologized, the Lan family would undoubtedly lose face. However, this wasn't what he cared about the most. What he was most concerned about was how terrifying Bailey Hongzhuang's mind was. Logically speaking, under the circumstances of the Battle of Zhuolu, Bailey Hongzhuang should have poisoned him. However, Bailey Hongzhuang did not do so. She seemed to have expected this day. It was precisely because of this that she was so fearless when she came to the Lan clan alone. This was because Bailey Hongzhuang had already thought of a way to deal with all the moves they had prepared. According to his understanding, this Bailey Hongzhuang had just become the young palace master of Limitless Palace. However, in the face of their Lan family's battle array, Bailey Hongzhuang remained calm and composed. This temperament alone was enough to prove her extraordinariness. Comparing the two, it was not strange that Lan Qinyan was defeated by her. Faced with that face that was so similar to Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing, Lan Jingquang couldn't help but feel a strong sense of dissatisfaction. This feeling was just like when he was pressed down by Lan Yunxiao. He lost again. We didn't investigate this matter clearly. I apologize to young Palace Master Bailey. Please forgive us. Lan Jingquang abruptly raised his head. That feminine and handsome face was filled with a faint smile, as if the previous hostility had never occurred. Seeing the speed at which Lan Jingquang's expression changed, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but sneer. Chapter 2672. However, this kind of apology wasn't what Bailey Hongzhuang wanted. Since Master Quang is apologizing to me, I naturally have to accept it. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly, but suddenly changed the topic. However, just now, almost everyone present was making things difficult for me. Now that I'm apologizing, it's Master Quang's fault. Isn't this a bit wrong? Once these words were spoken, Lan Kaiqing and the other elders couldn't help but glare at Bailey Hongzhuang angrily. Bailey Hongzhuang's meaning was very clear. She didn't want Lan Jingquang's apology alone, but the entire Lan family's apology. Little girl, leave a way out for everything. Don't go overboard. I'm afraid it won't end well in the future. Lan Kaiqing's eyes were cold and full of threat. Lan Jingquang's apology had already disgraced the entire Lan family. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was still being overbearing. If all the elders were to apologize to Bailey Hongzhuang together, it would be a joke. Second elder's words are really interesting. Why don't I return the same words to you? At that time, I left a way out for Lan Qinyan, but it caused all of you to gang up on her. Speaking of which, leaving a way out doesn't seem to be a good thing? Bailey Hongzhuang's expression didn't change. Her words were extremely resolute, but her face still had a trace of a gentle and moving smile. And it was this kind of expression that made Lan Kaiqing and the others even more unhappy. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Lan Kaiqing's old face stiffened. He only felt that the other party had ruthlessly slapped his face, making him extremely embarrassed. To think that I've always respected the Lan family and thought that the Lan family's actions were open-minded. Now it seems that the Lan family is only SOSO. They're not even willing to apologize when they're in the wrong. Forget it. Bailey Hongzhuang waved her hand. Her face revealed deep disappointment, as if she didn't have any expectations for the Lan family. However, Lan Jingquang and the others couldn't help but secretly curse in their hearts. Respect the Lan family? If these words were said by the successors of other forces, they would still believe it. However, these words were said by Limitless Palace's people. It was as fake as it could be. When the Lan family expressed goodwill to Limitless Palace ignored them. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang kept saying that she respected the Lan family, she didn't need to say the opposite words, right? But now that Bailey Hongzhuang had said it, they could only endure their disgust, unable to refute. Otherwise, they couldn't say that Limitless Palace didn't respect of the Lan family. Wasn't this also slap their own face? Of Palace limitless of limitless, limitless, limitless to say limitless? Looking at the indifferent and wanton Bailey Hongzhuang, Lan Qinyan only felt that Bailey Hongzhuang had suddenly become incomparably dazzling. This kind of situation, Bailey Hongzhuang actually reversed it just like that. And now, her father, who had always been a strategist in her eyes, actually apologized to Bailey Hongzhuang. This kind of contrast caused an indescribable jealousy to rise in her heart. Based on what? All these unsolvable problems were easily solved in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. Beichen Yunjue, let's go. Bailey Hongzhuang took a step forward. Her face was still filled with disappointment and helplessness towards the Lan family. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's retreating appearance, Lan Kaiqing and the others gnashed their teeth in anger. If they let Bailey Hongzhuang leave like this, wouldn't Bailey Hongzhuang do whatever she wanted? Chapter 2673. Young Palace Master Bailey, it's true that our Lan family didn't investigate thoroughly and caused a misunderstanding. I apologize on behalf of the entire Lan family. I hope you won't take it to heart. At this moment, Lan Borong spoke up. He wasn't as angry as Lan Kaiqing and the others. On the contrary, he only had admiration and respect for Bailey Hongzhuang. Her boldness was truly similar to Lan Yunxiao's style in the past. Regardless of whether Bailey Hongzhuang was Lan Yixuan or not, in the face of such an excellent junior, he really appreciated her. Oh! Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang stopped and looked at Lan Kaiqing and the others. The outcome was set. Although Lan Kaiqing and the others gritted their teeth, they could only lower their heads and admit their mistake. They had made the wrong move. We're truly sorry. Everyone spoke up. The smile on Bailey Hongzhuang's lips gradually widened. Looking at the unwilling but forced faces in front of her, she only felt a burst of happiness. This was the interest she took back first. It wasn't time for them to apologize yet. Since that's the case, I won't take it to heart. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly and sat down again. I spilled my food and wine just now. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble someone to prepare it for me again. Lan Kaiqing and the others couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood when they heard Bailey Hongzhuang's words. Now that things had developed to this point, could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang was still planning to continue eating? However, judging from Bailey Hongzhuang's attitude, she clearly planned to do so. Lan Jingquang's expression was extremely gloomy. However, the initiative was now in Bailey Hongzhuang's hands. Even though he was extremely angry, he could only forcefully restrain himself. Next, Bailey Hongzhuang's face was full of smiles as she looked at the beautiful women in front of her. Lan Jingquang, Lan Qinyan, and the elders all had ashen faces. They wanted to leave but couldn't, so they could only awkwardly accompany her. Di Beichen and Mo Yunjue both gave Bailey Hongzhuang a thumbs up. What a slap to the face! Lan Qinyan stared at the smiling face opposite her. Her fingernails were already deeply embedded in her palms, dripping with blood, but she did not feel it in the slightest. An indescribable hatred filled her heart. She never thought that she would fall into the hands of Bailey Hongzhuang again today. Yu Siqing was undoubtedly the most awkward person present. The change in the situation was entirely caused by her. At this moment she couldn't sit still. If she had known this would happen, she wouldn't have come today. She could feel the malicious and resentful gazes of Lan Jingquang and the other elders of the Lan family. It was obvious that everyone had already pinned this debt on her head. As a result, her status in the Lan family would definitely plummet. This situation she couldn't imagine. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, Bailey Hongzhuang, Di Beichen, and Mo Yunjue returned to their residence. Faced with the ashen faces of the Lan family, Bailey Hongzhuang felt that it was an unusual appetizer. She ate very comfortably. I'm afraid that many people in the Lan family won't be able to sleep tonight. Mo Yunjue's resolute and cold face suddenly revealed a smile. It was as if an iceberg had melted. It was very charming. Lan Jingquang's face is as black as the bottom of a pot. It's so satisfying to look at. Xiao He couldn't hide the excitement on her face. Master's performance today was so mighty and domineering. Chapter 2674. What a coincidence! If it wasn't for the fact that the Lan clan didn't know about Yu Siqing's secret, they wouldn't have been caught unprepared by us today. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Even the heavens were helping her this time. Thinking about it, Yu Siqing had never been so humiliated in all these years. Di Beichen's lips curled into an evil smile. In my opinion, Yu Siqing's current situation is the worst. I'm afraid that the Lan clan will soon find her and denounce her for her crimes. I hope that Yu Siqing won't leave just like that. Otherwise, the good show in a month's time won't be good without her. Bailey Hongzhuang's brows furrowed slightly. Yu Siqing, Lan Jingquang and the others had to participate in the good show after this. If any of them were missing, it would be less exciting. Yu Siqing doesn't dare to leave, Mo Yunjue suddenly said. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen looked at Mo Yunjue at the same time. They didn't know why Mo Yunjue was so sure. Yu Siqing always thought that the Yu clan's revenge was directed at her, so she had no choice but to stay in the clan. Only this way can the risk be minimized. Otherwise, with Yu Siqing's personality, she would have left long ago. She wouldn't stay here and be bullied. Mo Yunjue, as the young master of the heaven-devouring pavilion, was very familiar with such news. Bailey Hongzhuang didn't write on any of their rooms, but she wrote on Yu Siqing's room. Furthermore, Bailey Hongzhuang's poison was something that Yu Siqing couldn't detoxify. Therefore, Yu Siqing was afraid. Indeed, with Yu Siqing's reputation, she could choose to go to any power and wouldn't be treated badly. It's just that many people think that the Yu clan's heavy losses have a lot to do with Yu Siqing. This is why no one has extended an olive branch to Yu Siqing. This time, Yu Siqing is really at her wits' end. Di Beichen immediately understood everything. Before Yu Siqing could figure out who her opponent was, she could only swallow her anger. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two looked at each other, and then their faces all smiled. Lan Jingquang went to Yu Siqing's residence as soon as the banquet ended. Recently, Yu Siqing had been treating Lan Qingyan's poison. Therefore, Yu Siqing had been living in the Lan clan and didn't stay with the Yu clan members. This was what Yu Siqing's own, and Yu's. When Lan Jingquang went to find Yu Siqing, Lan Qingyan followed closely behind. Ever since her attitude changed, Lan Jingquang no longer hid anything from her. Although this incident was related to Lan Qingyan, it was ultimately Yu Siqing's fault. After all, back then, Lan Qingyan had already been tormented by the pain until she was in a daze. She had no idea what had happened. Yu Siqing knew that Lan Jingquang would definitely come to denounce her. Therefore, she waited in the room. She didn't think that there would be a day when the matter would be exposed. However, since things had come to this, she could only take one step at a time. Yu Manlan also rushed over when she heard the news. Although this matter had caused the Lan family to lose face, it was still very easy for her to know the details of the process with her status. Chapter 2675. Yu Manlan's feelings were the most complicated. Although she had been married to the Lan family for so many years, her surname was Yu. As her aunt, Yu Siqing had done something wrong. She would inevitably be implicated and labeled as well. Moreover, this time, Yu Siqing and the others had followed her to the Lan residence. This point had already made the Lan family very dissatisfied. However, because Yu Siqing had cured Lan Qingyan, the situation had eased a little. She didn't expect that such news would come out today, causing the Lan family's elders to lose face in front of Limitless Palace. This was even more serious. The Lan family and Limitless Palace had always been at odds. Lan Qingyan and Bailey Hongzhuang had a deep grudge against each other. Originally, they wanted to use this opportunity to display their Lan family's strength in front of Limitless Palace. Who would have thought that they would completely lose face now? Therefore, Yu Manlan was extremely depressed at this moment. If possible, she really didn't want to have any connection with Yu Siqing. Unfortunately, this was destined to be impossible. Faced with Yu Manlan's accusation, Yu Siqing coldly glanced at her. Her voice was full of displeasure and anger. If it weren't for the fact that your niece was useless and that the people from the family couldn't help her, why would I do such a thing? Yu Siqing didn't hide her disgust. Yu Manlan didn't have any outstanding talent since she was young. After marrying into the Lan family, she was suppressed by Mu Lingbing everywhere. Coincidentally, she and Mu Lingbing had a grudge against each other, so she helped Yu Manlan deal with Lan Yunxiao and the others. If it wasn't for this, what position would Yu Manlan have in the Lan family now? However, this niece of his was completely biased towards an outsider. Once something happened, Yu Manlan only thought of protecting herself and completely forgot about her previous kindness. How could she not be disgusted? Yu Manlan couldn't help but be stunned. She didn't expect Yu Siqing to push all the blame onto her after doing something wrong. "Aunt, how can you say that? If I didn't help, I'm afraid you wouldn't even have a place to stay now." Yu Manlan was also angered by Yu Siqing's words. From the beginning to the end, everything was out of her control. Now that things had developed to this point, Yu Siqing actually pushed all the problems onto her. She was simply too hateful. Hearing this, Yu Siqing sneered. "Even without you, the Lan family would still allow us to stay. You, on the other hand, have been in the Lan family for so many years. The family has helped you for so long, but when you encounter a problem, you act as if you're not involved. The clan has really raised an ingrate." Ingrate. Hearing these words, Yu Manlan's face couldn't help but turn ashen. Because of the Yu clan's matter, her current situation in the Lan clan was already very awkward. She didn't expect that she would even be labeled as an ingrate. She was simply angered to death. Yu Manlan was so angry that her entire body trembled, but she didn't know what to say. Her personality had always been like this, and it was hard for her to hide this side of her. "Useless thing," Yu Siqing cursed. Fortunately, Yu Manlan wasn't her daughter, or she would have killed her with her own hands. After so many years, even without Mu Lingbing's existence, Yu Manlan was still a dispensable existence in the Lan clan. Chapter 2676. At this moment, Lan Jingquang and Lan Qinyan arrived at Yu Siqing's residence. The two of them immediately saw Yu Manlan's slightly red eyes. However, at this moment, the two of them clearly weren't in the mood to care about Yu Manlan's emotions. Yu Manlan was also inextricably linked to these troubles. "Aunt, I'm sure you're well aware of what happened today. You've humiliated the entire clan by hiding it from us like this." Lan Jingquang's face was gloomy. Ever since the incident at the banquet, his face had never looked good. As the initiator of this banquet, he had to be responsible for the entire family. Now, it was his suggestion that had caused his family to suffer such humiliation. He had to give an explanation. Facing Lan Jingquang, Yu Siqing did not have her arrogant attitude. "Now that things have come to this, I don't need to explain the process. What do you plan to do?" Yu Siqing was very calm. Today, she had been exposed in front of so many people. There was no point in denying it. What she needed to do next was to deal with this matter. Lan Jingquang, who was originally extremely angry, sighed in his heart when he saw Yu Siqing's calm attitude. Indeed, there was no point in complaining now. He had already guessed the reason why Yu Siqing did this the moment he found out the truth. If not for Bailey Hongzhuang's appearance, Yu Siqing's actions would not have been discovered. "I have to give the family an explanation for this matter. Aunt, I'm afraid you will have to return to the Yu family's residence during this period. It's best not to appear in front of the Lan family members. This is good for both you and us." Hearing this, Yu Siqing could not help but sigh in relief. This situation was much better than she had imagined. She had already thought it through. If Lan Jingquang dared to punish her too much, then she would break the pot and cause a life-and-death struggle. Lan Jingquang and the others' current status was inseparable from her help. If they dared to burn the bridge after crossing the river, then she did not mind destroying them as well. All right. Lan Jingquang's thoughts were very deep. Just by looking at Yu Siqing's attitude towards Yu Manlan, he had already guessed Yu Siqing's thoughts. The moment he dared to speak up to expel Yu Siqing, with Yu Siqing's ruthless personality, she would definitely not let them off. Compared to Lan Yunxiao's matter being exposed, This situation was still within the scope of what he could handle. At this moment, Lan Jingquang was at a loss for words. This matter could only be resolved by himself. Recently, the troubles came one after another. After hearing Lan Jingquang's words, Lan Qingyan's eyes flashed with disbelief. This matter was completely caused by his aunt. Not only did she make them thank her for a few days in vain, but she also made all of them lose face. However, his father actually gave him such a simple punishment? Wasn't this a little too light? Yu Manlan was also surprised. She didn't know why Lan Jingquang would do this. You two can leave first. I have something to discuss with my aunt. Lan Jingquang glanced at Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan indifferently. His ashen face did not ease up at all. Chapter 26:77. After Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan left, only Lan Jingquang and Yu Siqing were left in the room. Aunt, Bailey Hongzhuang is really strange today. Didn't you say that the child had no chance of surviving? To Lan Jingquang, nothing else was more important than this. If Bailey Hongzhuang was really Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing's daughter, then the situation was different. With such similar faces, even he couldn't believe that they weren't related by blood. What's more, Bailey Hongzhuang had mentioned Lan Yunxiao's matter before, making him feel even more uneasy. 19 years had passed since that incident, and everyone thought that it had ended forever. But now, a person had suddenly appeared and brought up everything again. This was not right. Hearing Lan Jingquang's words, Yu Siqing's gaze deepened. She couldn't help recalling the details of the past. The child was so young and her dantian was destroyed. Indeed, she couldn't have survived. Yu Siqing frowned. She knew that the child couldn't have survived, so she didn't end her life. Because Lan Yixuan had gradually died in Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing's arms. That was the most painful thing for them. But this Bailey Hongzhuang is too similar. Could something have happened during the process? Lan Jingquang stared at Yu Siqing. He didn't know anything about medicine, but Yu Siqing was an authority in this field. Yu Siqing muttered to herself for a moment before saying, unless they found a heavenly treasure, Lan Yixuan could have survived. But Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing had already been captured by us, and there's no news of the child. With such a small chance, it shouldn't have been possible for her to survive. Moreover, we've asked Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing all these years. The sorrow in their eyes is definitely not an act. Lan Jingquang didn't care about this and said in a low voice, that means there's still a chance for her to survive. Yu Siqing paused for a moment, then nodded. As long as they didn't see Lan Yixuan die with their own eyes, anything could have happened during the process. If that's really the case, then Lan Yixuan's life is too long. Yu Siqing still found it unbelievable. Even an adult wouldn't have been able to survive such serious injuries, let alone a child. Back then, I found it strange that Wuji Palace was so cold to our Lan family's goodwill. If Bailey Hongzhuang is really Lan Yixuan, then everything makes sense. Could it be that she knew the truth? That's why she hated Qingyan, so that's why she poisoned her? Lan Jingquang seemed to have connected all the dots in an instant. Many of the answers that he couldn't answer before could now be explained. Yu Siqing didn't know how to answer to his conjecture. It wasn't a possibility, was a possibility, was a possibility, was a possibility, were, was, had, s? Back then, Lan Yixuan's dantian had already been shattered. It was almost impossible for her to repair it. Even if she could repair it, her cultivation speed would definitely be incomparable to before. Chapter 26:78. Even if they could connect the dots, they still had to consider objective factors. With all these factors, the probability of Bailey Hongzhuang being Lan Yixuan was less than 1 in 10,000. When we captured Lan Yunxiao and Lan Yixuan wasn't with them. Furthermore, they weren't escaping from a large faction but an ordinary dynasty. There, they wouldn't have been able to find any friends to take Lan Yixuan in. Even if Lan Yixuan hadn't died, they would have only placed her in a certain family. Could it be that in such an emergency situation, they would write down Lan Yixuan's background? That's impossible. Yu Siqing shook her head. The probability of such a thing happening was too small. If she were in Mu Lingbing's shoes, she wouldn't have directed her hatred towards the child either. After all, even if a heavily injured child had survived, she wouldn't have been able to take revenge with her insignificant strength. Lan Jingquang's expression turned hesitant when he heard Yu Siqing's words. Everything Yu Siqing had said was the truth. As one of the pursuers, he was well aware of the situation Lan Yunxiao and the others had been in. They had been on the run the entire time and hadn't had the time to care about anything else. If Beili Hongzhuang really was Lan Yixuan, she would have come to cause a ruckus a long time ago. Why hadn't she done anything for so many years? There were too many questions and Lan Jingquang couldn't come up with a definite answer. If Beili Hongzhuang isn't Lan Yixuan, then how do we explain her appearance? Lan Jingquang frowned. Beili Hongzhuang's appearance today had given him a huge shock. Things that he had chosen to gradually forget had now appeared in front of him in an instant. He was a little flustered. Yu Siqing shook her head. I don't know either. Perhaps it's just a coincidence? However, when she said the word coincidence, she felt a little guilty. Could there really be such a coincidence in this world? I will immediately send people to investigate this matter. Fortunately, there's still time and a chance to clarify everything. Tomorrow, Beili Hongzhuang and the others would enter the Divine Ice Pond. In the following month, he would do his best to investigate Beili Hongzhuang's true identity. If Beili Hongzhuang really was Lan Yixuan, then he would take Beili Hongzhuang's life as soon as possible. This woman couldn't be left alive. In fact, when he first learned that Beili Hongzhuang had the inheritance of the seven-colored god pearl in her body, he was also very nervous. In the history of the Lan family's history, Lan Yixuan's inheritors, and Lan Yixuan's Yun's inheritors. That was why he was so eager to destroy Beili Hongzhuang? Once Beili Hongzhuang grew up, he would forever be suppressed by Lan Yunxiao, never to be able to rise again. Lan lands of Lan Yunyun's Lanus. Even if Lan Qinyan wasn't the true inheritor of the Rainbow Pearl, her cultivation speed was still very shocking. Sometimes, he would think that if Lan Qinyan had such talent, then as the inheritor, Lan Yixuan, was still alive, how shocking would her achievements be? Chapter 2679. At this moment, Lan Jingquang had already made his decision. Once this news was confirmed, no matter how Di Beichen or Mo Yunjue tried to stop him, he would take Beili Hongzhuang's life within the Lan family's sphere of influence. Otherwise, if Beili Hongzhuang continued to develop, the consequences would be unimaginable. Aunt, there's something I need to trouble you with. Lan Jingquang gathered his thoughts and looked at Yu Siqing. Speak. Prepare a lethal poison. It must kill her in one strike. Lan Jingquang's voice was cold and gloomy. Coupled with his feminine expression, he was clearly a venomous snake. He definitely wouldn't allow any accidents to ruin his plans. He would eliminate all obstacles one by one. Yu Siqing looked deeply at Lan Jingquang. She already knew of Lan Jingquang's plan. However, this was also why she admired Lan Jingquang. Once he made a move, he would show no mercy. Just like when he dealt with her own brother's family, she never saw any struggle or fluctuation of humanity in his eyes. All right. Lan Jingquang's expression softened. He smiled and said, Aunt, I'll have to trouble you to stay there for the next few days. If there's anything you need, just tell Manlan. I'll definitely prepare it for you. I was indeed in the wrong this time. This is what I should do. At this moment, smiles appeared on the faces of the two equally ruthless people. After leaving Yu Siqing's room, Lan Jingquang's expression darkened. Today, Beili Hongzhuang's appearance had shocked all the elders of the Lan family. If he had such thoughts, the others would naturally have the same thoughts. He could even sense that some of the elders' gazes towards Beili Hongzhuang had changed. If Beili Hongzhuang was Lan Yixuan, then she was a member of the Lan family. Although many people in the family were on his side, there were still many old fellows who still remembered their past relationship. Once they acknowledged Bailey Hongzhuang, he was almost certain that these old fellows would take good care of Bailey Hongzhuang, considering their past debt to Lan Yunxiao. As for Lan Hongtai, he had been looking forward to seeing Lan Yunxiao and the others again. Once he knew about this, he would definitely protect Bailey Hongzhuang. This was all trouble. He had to complete all of this as soon as possible. Unfortunately, Yu Siqing needed some time to concoct the poison. Otherwise, he would have poisoned Bailey Hongzhuang to death. Patriarch, did you see Bailey Hongzhuang today? Lan Borong arrived at the residence of the Patriarch. He knew how much the Patriarch wanted to see Bailey Hongzhuang with his own eyes. However, Lan Hongtai usually wouldn't attend such a banquet. If he attended today, it would arouse everyone's suspicion. In addition, Bailey Hongzhuang's appearance was extremely similar to Bailey Hongzhuang's, so it was very likely that it would have an adverse effect on her. Lan Hongtai nodded. His weathered but dignified face was filled with deep emotion. His deep eyes faintly revealed a trace of trembling and excitement. She must be Yun Zhao's child. From the moment he saw Bailey Hongzhuang, Lan Hongtai had already determined everything. That posture, that expression, and that imposing manner of looking down on the world were too similar. He couldn't be more familiar with the son he doted on the most in his life. Chapter 2680. Lan Borong's expression changed when he saw Lan Hongtai's excitement and certainty. A trace of excitement welled up in his heart. Kinship was one of the most mysterious emotions in the world. Even if they hadn't seen each other for many years, the blood ties in their bones would never dissipate. In reality, none of them could be certain that Bailey Hongzhuang was Lan Yixuan. However, they were certain that she was Lan Yixuan without a doubt. It was an intuition that came from the bottom of their hearts. Househead, should we find a chance to have a chat with Bailey Hongzhuang? Lan Borong suggested. They had no idea what had happened in the past few years. Only by asking Bailey Hongzhuang would they be able to understand the truth. Ever since Lan Yunxiao's family of 3 left, they hadn't received any news from them. They had thought that Lan Yixuan was dead without a doubt, but now they saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had grown into such an outstanding person. Didn't that mean that Lan Yunxiao and the others had been living well all these years after they left? If that was the case, then they could be at ease. Lan Hongtai pondered for a moment before shaking his head. Forget it. Tomorrow is the day that the divine ice pond will open. Let her enter the divine ice pond in a good mood. As for the rest, we'll wait for them to come out of the divine ice pond before making any plans. Confusion surfaced in Lan Borong's eyes. Logically speaking, the person that Lan Hongtai had been worried about for so many years was now in their Lan family. He should be the first to understand everything. However, Lan Hongtai hadn't shown any signs of anxiety since he'd heard the news. This was really strange. Lan Hongtai saw through Lan Borong's thoughts and slowly said, "If Yixuan knew about everything, what kind of attitude do you think she would have towards our Lan family?" As soon as he said this, Lan Borong couldn't help but be taken aback. His heart, which originally didn't understand, instantly understood everything. The house head was afraid. He was afraid of Lan Yixuan's hateful gaze. No matter how regretful the house head had been all these years, no matter how much he didn't want to see, the damage from back then had been done. If he was Lan Yixuan, he would probably hate the Lan family to the extreme. It was indeed not easy to bear the hatred of one's loved ones. What happened back then wasn't what you wanted to see, Patriarch. If you weren't in seclusion, how could such a thing happen? I believe that if Yi Xian knew all of this, she would definitely understand. But, as her grandfather, I really didn't protect her well. Lan Hongtai sighed. He didn't want to find any excuses for himself. It was indeed his fault for not being able to protect them. Long ago, he had vaguely sensed Lan Jingquang's unwillingness, and he had reminded him several times. He thought Lan Jingquang would be able to understand all of this, But not only did Lan Jingquang not understand, he even did something so extreme. It was completely out of his expectations. Hearing this, Lan Borong was at a loss for words. What the patriarch said was indeed the truth. If I go to Bailey Hongzhuang now, Jingquang will definitely notice. I'm afraid there will be another storm. Chapter 2681. Lan Borong nodded. Every time Lan Hongtai did something, he had enough reasons. The current situation wasn't suitable, so he was a bit anxious. After all, the commotion had just happened this afternoon. Too many people were paying attention to the househead's actions. All these years, the househead's attitude had been very obvious. Once he went there, he was afraid it would provoke Lan Jingquang's actions. Borong, send people to pay attention to Jingquang's movements. Absolutely don't allow anyone to harm Bailey Hongzhuang. Lan Hongtai's expression was cold and stern. His negligence had caused a lifetime of regret. He would never let such a thing happen again. Don't worry, househead. I've already sent people to watch. If there's any movement, we'll be the first to notice. Lan Hongtai nodded, a satisfied expression on his face. I heard Bailey Hongzhuang's performance this afternoon was very spectacular? Lan Hongtai smiled and asked about what happened at the banquet. He already knew that Lan Jingquang and the others were going to use this opportunity to make trouble for Bailey Hongzhuang, so he sent Lan Borong to pay attention. Once the situation developed into a state of mutual hostility, he could mediate and prevent Bailey Hongzhuang from getting hurt. However, according to the information he gathered, Bailey Hongzhuang's performance today was truly one man holding back 10,000 men. She directly destroyed all of Lan Jingquang's plans. Lan Borong also revealed a smile. Indeed, Bailey Hongzhuang's performance today really made people have a whole new level of respect for her. Even in the face of Master Quang and the others' aggression, Bailey Hongzhuang was still as calm as ever, as confident as ever. Thinking about it, no matter who saw Bailey Hongzhuang's performance today, they would all sigh in admiration. It was truly too outstanding. At the same time, today's situation allowed them to understand Di Beichen and Mo Yunjue's attitude. They were completely on Bailey Hongzhuang's side. It wasn't something that could be broken by benefit. Lan Hongtai listened to Lan Borong's detailed explanation, and his face gradually flushed. He couldn't help but recall the days when Lan Yunxiao was in the family. When Lan Qingyan returned to the room, she had a puzzled expression. Mother, do you know what's so special about that Bailey Hongzhuang? Today, almost all the elders revealed a very shocked expression after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang. I don't understand why. This point, Lan Qingyan had never understood. However, she couldn't ask Lan Jingquang about the situation before, so she could only discuss it with Yumanlan. However, this discussion was obviously meaningless, because Yumanlan didn't see Bailey Hongzhuang's appearance at all. Instead, she showed a strange look. Is everyone's expression strange when they see Bailey Hongzhuang? Why is that? Looking at Yumanlan's completely clueless appearance, Lan Qingyan sighed. Suddenly, there was no need to continue speaking. Her mother had been drifting away from the core for so many years. Forget it, I'll wait for my father to come back. Lan Qingyan returned to the room with a lack of interest. Seeing Lan Qingyan's appearance, Yumanlan's expression became even more awkward. It seemed that whether it was the Yu family, Lan Jingquang, or even Lan Qingyan, they all looked down on her. Chapter 2682. The next day, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two got up early and headed towards the entrance of the Divine Ice Pond. Ever since the incident at yesterday's banquet, they had been staying in their residence. No one from the Lan family came to find trouble with them. In fact, under such a humiliating situation, even if the Lan family wanted to investigate, they couldn't bring themselves to do so. Under the guidance of the Lan family's servant, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two walked all the way to the depths of the Lan family. Along the way there were pavilions, small bridges, flowing water, and winding corridors. It was a beautiful sight to behold. The style of a sect was often grand and bold. On the contrary, the style of an aristocratic family was more quiet and elegant. It was more suitable for living. Along the way, the three inevitably met many disciples of the Lan family. As an aristocratic family, the Lan family's power was intertwined. The number of disciples was also very shocking. It was no wonder that there were extremely outstanding seeds in every generation. However, compared to the attitude of the Lan family disciples yesterday, their gazes were clearly different today. Although the incident at yesterday's banquet wasn't deliberately spread, paper can't hide fire. From the attitude of the Lan family's elder and the subsequent outburst of anger, it was possible to determine that they had fallen into a disadvantageous position. Towards these three young but extraordinary successors, everyone couldn't help but feel envious and look up to them. One day, they would become an illustrious figure in the Shengxian continent. This was the dream of every cultivator. However, with Lan Qinyan pressuring them, there was probably no hope. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two arrived, they saw a cave in front of them. A huge stone door had already blocked the entrance. On both sides of the stone door, there were extremely high cultivation Lan family disciples guarding it. Lan Jingquang, Lan Qinyan, and the others had arrived earlier and were already waiting for them. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang appear, Lan Qinyan's eyes stared at Bailey Hongzhuang. The hatred and unwillingness in her eyes were unconcealed. Now that she and Bailey Hongzhuang were mortal enemies, there was no need to hide these emotions. Facing Lan Qinyan's hateful gaze, Bailey Hongzhuang turned a deaf ear. She simply couldn't be bothered with this kind of gaze. It only made Lan Qinyan seem petty. Every time the divine pond of ice opened, there would be a total of 8 spots. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two had already taken up 3 spots. Other than Lan Qinyan, there were also 4 other disciples of the Lan clan who entered together with them. At this moment, they were standing beside Lan Qinyan. From time to time, their gazes would fall on the stone door. Their faces were filled with unconcealable excitement. Once they entered the divine pond of ice and snow, they would have a chance to improve their strength. For cultivators, there were many benefits. When Lan Jingquang saw Bailey Hongzhuang's familiar face, his eyes couldn't help but darken. Right now, he had already listed Bailey Hongzhuang as an enemy. In his heart, he made up his mind. Whether or not Bailey Hongzhuang was Lan Yunxiao's daughter, he had to kill her to prevent future troubles. Since everyone is here, we can enter the divine pond of ice now, Lan Jingquang said slowly. However, just as Lan Jingquang finished speaking, an unexpected figure appeared in front of everyone. Seeing the person who had come, everyone from the Lan clan bowed and said, "Greetings, clan head." Chapter 2683. He was the head of the Lan family, Lan Hongtai. This was Bailey Hongzhuang's first time meeting her grandfather. From Lan Hongtai's weathered face, she could vaguely see some similarities with Lan Yunxiao. She could tell that Lan Hongtai must have been a handsome man when he was young. Bailey Hongzhuang didn't have any hatred towards Lan Hongtai, because she knew that Lan Hongtai had suffered no less than them in this matter. From the fact that Lan Hongtai had never handed over the position of head of the family to Lan Jingquang, she could tell that he had been deeply distressed over the matter. Moreover, she had heard from her father that Lan Hongtai had doted on him since they were young. Although Bailey Hongzhuang didn't remember much, Lan Hongtai had been very loving to her. However, after that incident they had never seen each other again. Lan Yunxiao was able to let go of many things in the Lan family, but Lan Hongtai was his greatest concern. Over the past few days, Bailey Hongzhuang had learned from Di Beichen and Mo Yunjue that the lofty head of the Lan family had always been concerned about them. After everyone saw Lan Hongtai arrive, a look of surprise appeared on their faces at the same time. Usually, the head of the family rarely paid attention to family matters. Who would have thought that he would personally come today? Lan Jingquang's face darkened the moment he saw Lan Hongtai. As Lan Hongtai's son, how could he not know the reason for Lan Hongtai's appearance? He must have come for Bailey Hongzhuang. Lan Yunxiao had disappeared for so many years, but Lan Hongtai, this old man, had never given up looking for him. In Lan Hongtai's heart, he, Lan Jingquang, couldn't even compare to a dead man. Lan Qingyan's eyes were also filled with surprise, but she soon revealed a smile. Her grandfather must have come to support her. Yesterday, Bailey Hongzhuang had been too arrogant, so as the head of the family, her grandfather had personally come to preside over the meeting. Lan Hongtai glanced at the crowd, but his gaze lingered on Bailey Hongzhuang for a few seconds. Lan Hongtai's heart couldn't help but beat faster as he looked at that face up close. If he could see Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing again in this life, how wonderful would that be? However, he also knew that if Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing were still alive, they wouldn't have disappeared for so many years. Lan Yunxiao might hate him, but he wouldn't refuse to acknowledge him as his father. But as long as Lan Yixuan was still alive, he, Lan Hongtai, would do everything in his power to take good care of her. Bailey Hongzhuang could feel the love and complex emotions in Lan Hongtai's eyes, and her heart was slightly moved. What everyone said was true. Presumably, Lan Hongtai came for her today. Young Palace Master Bailey, young Sect Master D, and young Tower Master Mo, the three of you are indeed young elites. Seeing you today, you are indeed extraordinary. Lan Hongtai said with a faint smile. Family head Lan is too kind. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others cupped their fists. This divine ice pond is my Lan family's inheritance. The energy within the pond can help cultivators break through to the purple realm. However, the power of ice and snow isn't something ordinary people can endure. The three of you must be mentally prepared. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two looked at each other. They really didn't know much about the ice-snow divine pond. Chapter 2684. In an instant, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two understood that Lan Hongtai was purposely reminding Bailey Hongzhuang. From Lan Jingquang's previous attitude, it was clear that he didn't intend to tell Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two about the divine pond of ice. As members of the Lan family, Lan Qingyan and the others were well aware of this. Once they entered the divine pond of ice, it would take a lot of effort for them to adapt. Lan Qingyan's expression changed when she saw Lan Hongtai openly reminding Bailey Hongzhuang. She kept muttering in her heart, "What's wrong with grandfather today? He clearly knows that he has a grudge against Bailey Hongzhuang, yet he's still reminding them. This is too strange." Lan Kaiqing and Lan Jingquang looked at each other with gloomy expressions. It seemed that this old man couldn't hold back after knowing Bailey Hongzhuang's familiar face. He didn't even investigate whether it was her or not. At the same time, it could be seen how much importance this old man placed on Lan Yunxiao's family. "Oh!" Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curved into a faint smile. "I've only heard of the miraculous effects of the divine pond of ice, but I didn't know the power of ice and snow inside was so strong. The divine pond of ice and snow is covered in ice and snow all year round. Moreover, the power of ice and snow inside has a very strong penetrative power. You must use your origin power to resist it. However, the higher the degree of acceptance, the greater the benefits for cultivators. You can decide based on your own situation." Lan Hongtai's face rippled with a faint benevolent smile. He didn't hide anything from his words. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two understood. "Many thanks for Lan family head's guidance," Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two said in unison. Lan Hongtai looked at Bailey Hongzhuang's refined and courteous appearance, especially when he didn't see Bailey Hongzhuang's hateful gaze. He couldn't help but sigh in relief. At the same time, he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. If Bailey Hongzhuang hated him, then he was certain that Bailey Hongzhuang was Lan Yixuan. However, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't do anything. Perhaps Bailey Hongzhuang didn't know her true identity? For a moment, thousands of thoughts ran through Lan Hongtai's mind, but he didn't reveal any of them on his face. No matter what the truth was, He would understand, everything would understand once Bailey Hongzhuang came out of the divine pond of ice. Lan Yishuan's SS was the divine pond of ice, Lan Hongzhuang's, Lanzazazazaz, Heezazaz's right. Lan Yishuan Lan's Zhaoz's. Lanza s alsos to hims, Yishuan's, Lan's, he. Was, he s Lan's this. Lan's right of Hongzha of course, it, s not only Lan Hongtai, but they also wanted to know the relationship between Bailey Hongzhuang and Lan Yunxiao. Compared to Lan Hongtai's faction's elders, Lan Jinghuang's faction's elders couldn't help but feel threatened. This wasn't a good sign. Lan Jinghuang's heart was filled with helplessness. When it rains, it pours. According to his original plan, Lan Qinyan would have become the Lan family's new family head. That way, they wouldn't have to worry about many problems. However, all of this was destroyed in the hands of Bailey Hongzhuang. Chapter 2685. Lan Kaiqing and the others looked at each other. The current situation was much more serious than they had imagined. If they did not get rid of this problem, their efforts over the years would all be for naught. None of them could bear the consequences of such a thing. Fortunately, Bailey Hongzhuang would not leave the Lan family immediately. They still had time to prepare. However, the changes in Lan Kaiqing and the others' expressions fell into Bailey Hongzhuang's sharp eyes. She could not help but sneer in her heart. It seemed that her mere appearance was enough to make Lan Jinghuang and the others feel threatened. When she came out of the divine pond of ice and snow, the scene would be much more exciting. At that time, she would not only make Lan Jinghuang and the others feel threatened, but she would also make them understand the meaning of despair. Since everyone is ready, let's go in. I hope you'll all have a good harvest. Lan Hongtai was full of smiles, but his gaze could not help but fall on Bailey Hongzhuang. However, he quickly concealed it. Lan Borong looked at Lan Hongtai's appearance, and his heart was full of emotions. When the family head saw Bailey Hongzhuang, his heart was full of love and guilt. He was afraid that he couldn't stop it. However, as long as they could confirm Bailey Hongzhuang's true identity, they would not allow the tragedy of that year to happen again, even if they had to risk their lives. He only hoped that Lan Jinghuang and the others would behave themselves. If they dared to do such a disgraceful thing again, they would not be able to tolerate it any longer. Kacha! The stone door slowly opened, and a shocking cold air rushed out, causing everyone to involuntarily shiver. This chill was not any weaker than being in an ice mountain. Let's go in. In the next moment, Lan Qinyan led the Lan family disciples into the divine pond of ice and snow. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two followed closely behind. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and the others entered, the stone door behind them quickly closed and a layer of barrier was set up. Without this layer of barrier, the stone door would not be able to stop the chill from leaking out of the divine pond of ice, and the entire Lan family would be in the cold. The cold chi here is much stronger than in the snow origin country. Bailey Hongzhuang looked around at the pure white land. She remembered that she had also passed through the country of ice when she was heading to the Bloodland Abyss. However, the coldness of that place paled in comparison to this place. This divine pond of ice and snow should be an extremely cold place. I didn't expect it to be located in the Lan clan. Di Baichen sighed in admiration. This kind of magical place was often created by the uncanny workmanship of nature. It was one of the many secret realms. But now, it was located in the Lan family, and became the exclusive resource of the Lan family. Presumably, the Lan family had paid a heavy price for this. It is said that the head of the Lan family established the Lan family after discovering the divine pond of ice and snow. There were many forces that coveted the divine pond of ice and snow, but the founder of the Lan family was also an extremely powerful figure. Using all kinds of connections and political compromises, the divine pond of ice and snow was finally preserved. Then, as the Lan family's forces grew stronger, the divine pond of ice and snow became the exclusive property of the Lan family. Mo Yunjue slowly explained. The heavenly slaughter tower had the most abundant information. He already knew about this history before coming to the Lan family. Chapter 2686. Bailey Hongzhuang's group wasn't slow either. As they gradually went deeper, they discovered that they were in a valley. White snow had already covered the entire valley, leaving only a slender passage leading into the valley. As Bailey Hongzhuang's group walked out of the passage, the scene before them suddenly opened up. A deep pool appeared before them. White cold air floated above it. At first glance, it looked like an immortal soup. It was misty and very enchanting. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's group wasn't in the mood to appreciate this beautiful scene because the cold air that invaded their bodies had already made them cold. This cold air is really terrifying. Just standing outside the divine pond of ice and snow is already hard to resist. Once you enter the divine pond of ice and snow, the coldness is really unimaginable. Her ink-black phoenix eyes were filled with shock. Successfully breaking through to the purple realm wasn't an easy task. Thinking about it, just withstanding the cold of the divine ice pool would require a lot of strength. If they couldn't withstand this pain, then naturally they wouldn't be able to gain anything. Fortunately, with our strength, our physical fitness is far superior to ordinary people. Later, when we enter the divine ice pool, we have to be careful. If we're not careful, it'll be bad if we injure our origin. Di Baichen reminded. This cold air was filled with strong destructive power. Once the damage to the body was too great, it could have a great impact on the cultivator's future cultivation, leaving behind hidden injuries. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Let's act according to the situation. This divine ice pool's reputation is so great. I'm sure there's a way to absorb it. Lan Qinyan naturally saw the frown on Bailey Hongzhuang's face. Suddenly, her face couldn't help but reveal a touch of ridicule. Bailey Hongzhuang, this divine ice pool isn't as simple as you think it is. Even if we, the Lan family, don't absorb the energy of the divine ice pool, we'll often adapt to the cold air of the divine ice pool. Our resistance to cold air is much stronger than yours. Lan Qingyan's voice was filled with pride. If it wasn't for this, the Lan family wouldn't have easily taken out the quota to enter the divine ice pool as a reward. Outsiders didn't understand the divine ice pool, and they didn't have any resistance to it. It was very difficult to absorb the energy of the divine ice pool. Even if they did, the amount they absorbed was far from comparable to the amount of energy absorbed by the Lan family. In 3 years, the divine pond of ice and snow could only produce so much energy. If outsiders could absorb less, the Lan family would naturally be able to absorb more. Behind Lan Qinyan, the other 4 members of the Lan family also had smiles on their faces. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2 were so arrogant yesterday. Today, they could take advantage of this opportunity to dampen their prestige. Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2 exchanged glances. As expected, the situation was not as simple as it seemed. Let's go in. Lan Qinyan gave Bailey Hongzhuang a provocative look, then said to the 4 disciples of the Lan family. In fact, the divine pond of ice and snow could not accommodate so many people at the same time. However, the Lan family thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2 could not absorb much at all. Therefore, they added 2 more spots. The 2 disciples of the Lan family who benefited were also very happy. This was a bargain. If it wasn't for the arrival of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2, they wouldn't have such a good opportunity. Chapter 2687. As Lan Qingyan's group of 5 entered the divine pond of ice, Bailey Hongzhuang discovered that their faces were quickly covered with a layer of purple. Clearly, they were affected by the cold air. Even though Lan Qingyan's group already had some resistance to the cold of the divine pond of ice, they were still unable to withstand it when they entered. In comparison, Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 3, who had never come in contact with it, were at an even greater disadvantage. Let's go down as well, Di Baichen slowly said. Since they were already here, they naturally couldn't miss this good opportunity. The cold air of this divine pond of ice is astonishing. We must use our elemental energy to protect our bodies. Once our bodies have adapted, we can withdraw some of our elemental energy depending on the situation. Mo Yunjua nodded. The power of this divine pond of ice is to borrow this cold air to transform the cultivator's body, removing the impurities in the dantian and body. Only then can one smoothly break through to the purple realm. We will act according to our own body's condition. Although Lan Qingyan's group is a bit better than us, it probably won't be much better. It is said that the cultivators who came to the divine pond of ice to cultivate in the past also obtained great benefit. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang's phoenix eyes slightly narrowed. I understand. This cold air had a certain relationship with one's physical fitness. In comparison, although Lan Qingyan's body had some resistance, Bailey Hongzhuang was confident that her physical fitness was definitely not worse than Lan Qingyan's. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 3 entered the divine pond of ice and appeared in front of Lan Qingyan. This divine pond of ice was originally circular. Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 3 were adjacent to each other, but there was still a considerable distance between them. Just as they entered the divine pond of ice, Bailey Hongzhuang felt an extremely terrifying cold air enter her body through her pores, causing her body to stiffen for a moment. Fortunately, with the protection of her elemental energy, she wasn't affected too much. Lan Qingyan's gaze had been focused on Bailey Hongzhuang's face. After seeing the change in Bailey Hongzhuang's expression, the ridicule in her eyes became even more intense. In fact, she had never understood why the appearance of Bailey Hongzhuang would bring such a huge shock to the family. Last night, his father did not return. It seemed that he had gone to discuss with the elders. Since she had come over early in the morning, she couldn't ask him about it under the watchful eyes of so many people. She could only keep this question in mind. No matter how outstanding Bailey Hongzhuang was, logically speaking, she shouldn't be able to cause such a stir in the Lan family. After all, Di Baichen and Mo Yunjua were also extremely outstanding people. Although she could not understand the reason, Lan Qingyan knew that this was definitely not a good thing. It had been a long time since she had seen such a serious expression on her father's face. Her delicate face was covered with a bluish-purple color. Her captivating red lips had also turned bluish-green. Bailey Hongzhuang tried to gradually withdraw her elemental energy, but the cold air that followed after made people unable to help but shiver. Di Baichen and Mo Yunjua's situation was not much better than Bailey Hongzhuang's. However, their cultivation was one level higher than Bailey Hongzhuang's, so their resistance was also better. In comparison, the situation of Lan Qingyan's group of 5 was indeed much better than theirs. Bailey Hongzhuang, don't blame me for not reminding you. Chapter 2688. Lan Qingyan's eyes flashed with a malicious light. Bailey Hongzhuang had become her biggest enemy. She couldn't miss the opportunity to enter the divine pond of ice. Plus, Di Baichen and Mo Yunjua were strong. Even if she had 4 helpers, once they fought, it was hard to say who would win or lose. Moreover, she didn't neglect Bailey Hongzhuang's contract beast. Therefore, she could only put aside the idea of fighting in the divine pond of ice and wait until she left the divine pond of ice. Taking advantage of this opportunity, she must improve her strength as soon as possible so that she could crush Bailey Hongzhuang when she left. At this moment, she deliberately reminded Bailey Hongzhuang. Naturally, she didn't have any good intentions. She only hoped that Bailey Hongzhuang would be eager to absorb the power of the divine pond of ice and remove the protection of her elemental energy. She understood the power of the divine pond of ice very well. Once the foundation was damaged, it would be a lifelong injury. Since it's like this, wouldn't it be more convenient for you to absorb more energy? Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and turned a deaf ear to Lan Qingyan's reminder. With Lan Qingyan's personality, it would be strange if she sincerely reminded her. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang didn't buy it, Lan Qingyan didn't care. She used her family's secret method to forcibly raise her cultivation to the 9th level of the Blue Realm. Her foundation was slightly unstable. Taking advantage of the divine pond of ice, she could wash away some of the impurities in her elemental energy. With a stable foundation, she could break through to the Purple Realm. Once she succeeded in breaking through to the Purple Realm, Bailey Hongzhuang would definitely not be her opponent. Previously, it seemed like Sister Xiaojing, but now it was an insurmountable gap. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly closed her eyes and relaxed her body to accept the power of the divine pond of ice. She could feel that the power of the divine pond of ice was full of invasiveness. This power didn't need to be guided by the cultivator. This power would naturally enter the cultivator's body. However, this power quietly brought out some impurities after entering the cultivator's body. At the same time, it would improve the cultivator's body. Only the cold air would have a certain effect. Upon discovering this, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but inwardly sigh. This divine pond of ice and snow is truly a treasure. This kind of power could cleanse a cultivator's marrow and meridians. As a cultivator's strength increased, it would be more difficult to cleanse the marrow and meridians in the later stages. However, after cultivating for a long time, it was inevitable that there would be some impurities. The more impurities there were, the greater the limitation on the cultivator's improvement. Many people were stuck at a bottleneck because of the existence of these impurities. This was probably the reason why the divine pond of ice and snow could help cultivators increase their chances of breaking through to the Purple Realm. Di Baichen and Mo Yunjue also closed their eyes to adapt to the cold air of the divine pond of ice and snow. They each had their own methods. Such a good opportunity to increase his strength was not something that could be found at any time. He had to grasp it. As for Bailey Hongzhuang, her gaze fell on Lan Qinyan. In the past, it was Lan Qinyan who robbed her of her resources. Now, it was time for her to take back her own resources. Master, let us go in as well. The three beasties were also very curious about the power of the divine pond of ice and snow. There were a total of 5 people from the Lan family inside. They couldn't let the Lan family disciples take advantage of them. You guys have to be careful. This cold air is very powerful. With your current cultivation, it won't be easy to endure it. Chapter 2689. Don't worry, Master. We know what we're doing. The 3 beasts replied. As beasts, their physical strength was much stronger than that of human cultivators. Although their cultivation levels were not high enough, they still believed that there would be no problem with their own strength. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded when she saw that the 3 beasts were so confident. Try it out first. If you can't bear it, don't force yourself and retreat immediately. Do you understand? Understood. The 3 beasts nodded in unison. They knew that their foundation was the most important. Although the benefits were great, it would be over if their foundation was destroyed. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang released the 3 beasts. Xiao He and Xiao Bai slid down from her hair, while Baisher entered the divine pond of ice. The 3 beasts could not help but tremble when they entered the divine pond of ice. The cold air was too shocking. Be careful. Call me immediately if there are any problems, Bailey Hongzhuang said. Although the 3 beasts' cultivation levels were still a distance away from Blue Realm level 9, their strength was not bad. With their strong beasts' bodies, they might be able to withstand the cold air. Although the 3 beasts entered the divine pond of ice quietly, they could not hide from the crowd. Lan Qinyan and the other members of the Lan family could not help but open their eyes. The disciples of the Lan family could not help but frown when they saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had released her contracted beasts into the divine pond of ice. Young Palace Master Bailey, there are limited places in the divine pond of ice. How can you release your contracted beasts into it? The energy of the divine pond of ice was limited. It could only help so many cultivators at a time. If more people or beasts were to share the energy, it would cause them to lose their benefit. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyes and asked in return, I've never heard of that. The disciples of the Lan family could not help but pause when they heard that. Indeed, there was no explicit rule against it, but it was an unspoken fact. How precious was the energy of the divine pond of ice! It was already a great fortune for the cultivator to be able to obtain this energy, so how could he let his contracted beast absorb it as well? However, at this moment, Lan Qinyan waved her hand and said, "Forget it. There is indeed no rule that prohibits contract beasts from entering." Seeing that Lan Qinyan actually spoke out to stop them, the Lan family disciples couldn't help but be stunned. This situation wasn't right. Aren't young Master and Bailey Hongzhuang enemies? Why are you helping Bailey Hongzhuang now? Lan Qinyan looked at the 3 contract beasts floating above the ice-snow godly pond and had her own plans. Bailey Hongzhuang had so many contracted beasts, and they were so powerful. She was envious. It was not a wise decision for Bailey Hongzhuang to put her contracted beast into the divine pond of ice and snow. Even Bailey Hongzhuang would need a long time to adapt to such cold air, and these 3 contracted beasts would not be able to withstand such cold air. Once their foundation was damaged, it would be equivalent to crippling Bailey Hongzhuang's wings. Since Bailey Hongzhuang wanted to court death, why should she stop her? She believed that Bailey Hongzhuang would soon taste the consequences of her own actions. This Lan Qinyan is really strange today. Why did she suddenly become so easy to talk to? Xiao He was a little puzzled. This was not in line with Lan Qinyan's character. Chapter 2690. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Lan Qinyan is certain that you guys are unable to absorb the cold energy from the divine pond of ice. That's why she's so calm. If the 3 beasts could really absorb the cold energy, Lan Qinyan's expression would definitely turn extremely ugly. Hearing this, the 3 beasts felt a wave of dissatisfaction in their hearts. Throughout their journey, what they hated the most was being looked down upon by others. Isn't it just the divine pond of ice? I'm a dignified beast king. How could I not be able to absorb this energy? Baishur snorted coldly and closed its eyes. It tried its best to adapt to the cold energy and tried to absorb the energy. Xiao He and Xiao Bai were not to be outdone. They were not ordinary beasts. Although ordinary beasts would not be able to withstand this energy, it did not mean that they could not. Seeing the confidence of the 3 beasts, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a smile. She then calmed her heart and began to circulate the demon summoning scripture. As a heaven-defying technique, the demon summoning scripture had always been of great help to Bailey Hongzhuang. If it were not for the high level of this technique, she would not have been able to catch up to Lan Qinyan's cultivation in such a short period of time. Following the circulation of the demon summoning scripture, Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly felt that the cold energy in her body had weakened a little. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but be shocked. Could it be that the demon summoning scripture had a resistance against the cold energy? Thinking of this, Bailey Hongzhuang quickly circulated the demon summoning scripture. The energy from the divine pond of ice and snow also continuously flowed into her body following the circulation of the technique. With so much water entering Bailey Hongzhuang's body, logically speaking, this cold energy was not something that a cultivator could withstand. However, Bailey Hongzhuang did not feel the slightest bit. She only felt an endless amount of pure energy flowing into her body, removing the impurities in her body and filling her dantian at the same time. The rainbow divine pearl seemed to like the energy from the divine pond of ice and snow very much. Its flickering rainbow light became brighter and brighter as it spun in her dantian, absorbing the energy. After Bailey Hongzhuang confirmed that the cold air could no longer affect her body, she stopped worrying and began to absorb the energy. As soon as Lan Qinyan entered the divine ice pond, she had already released the aura of a rank 9 blue realm. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was only at rank 8 blue realm. If she wanted to catch up to Lan Qinyan's cultivation, she could only rely on the power of this divine ice snow pond. Bailey Hongzhuang's huge movements naturally attracted the attention of others. In an instant, other than Bailey Hongzhuang, everyone opened their eyes. When they saw Bailey Hongzhuang absorbing the energy without restraint, they couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Could it be that she's not afraid of the cold? The 4 disciples of the Lan family stared blankly at Bailey Hongzhuang as their eyes sparkled with disbelief. They had personally experienced how terrifying this cold air was. Logically speaking, it was Bailey Hongzhuang's first day at the Divine Ice Snow Pond. It should be impossible for her to adapt to this energy. Even if she could adapt, she would have to carefully absorb some of the energy. It was impossible for her to absorb freely. However, Bailey Hongzhuang in front of them did not seem to feel this at all. She was absorbing freely. Lan Qingyan's eyes widened. She did not understand how Bailey Hongzhuang did it. Most importantly, she noticed that the purplish color on Bailey Hongzhuang's face had disappeared. On the contrary, there was a faint blush lingering on her face. Chapter 2691. Lan Qingyan couldn't understand. Logically speaking, this should be impossible. How invasive was this cold air? Even the elders had to be extra careful and didn't dare to rashly absorb it. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's body didn't have any resistance, yet she was able to withstand it on the first day she entered the Divine Ice Snow Pond. How did she do it? Lan Qingyan couldn't figure it out no matter how hard she racked her brains. However, Bailey Hongzhuang in front of her had clearly adapted to the cold air. While Lan Qingyan was angrily waiting for Bailey Hongzhuang was wholeheartedly channeling the demon summoning scripture. The demon summoning scripture was a heaven-defying technique. Its ability was extremely impressive. Although Bailey Hongzhuang was shocked that it could withstand the cold air, it wasn't hard to accept. Lan Qingyan bit her lip with her pearly white teeth, looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's beautiful face. An indescribable hatred filled her heart. She couldn't understand why Bailey Hongzhuang's luck was so good. Thinking back, during the Battle of Zhuolu, Bailey Hongzhuang also inexplicably received the Primal Chaos Tablet's affirmation. From Lan Jingquang's mouth, she already understood that her Rainbow God Pearl caused her to be closer to the Primal Chaos Tablet. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's intimacy with the Primal Chaos Tablet was stronger than hers. And now, the Lan family's Divine Ice Snow Pond was actually being absorbed by Bailey Hongzhuang. This was simply infuriating. Di Baichen and Mo Yunjue couldn't help but be shocked when they saw Bailey Hongzhuang actually wantonly absorbing the energy from the Divine Ice Snow Pond. Then, both of their faces revealed smiles. Bailey Hongzhuang was indeed a miraculous woman. No matter where she was, her performance was astonishing. Looks like we have to work harder. Mo Yunjue's lips curled. Hongzhuang's performance was already so impressive. They couldn't drag her down. Let's see who can absorb more. Di Baichen chuckled. Then, he calmed down and began to cultivate. There was only so much energy in the Divine Ice Snow Pond. The more they absorbed, the less Lan Qingyan and the others could absorb. Previously, Lan Qingyan had looked down on them. Now they couldn't be weak. The influence of the cold qi from the divine pond of ice and snow was not small, but both Di Baichen and Mo Yunjue were not ordinary people. They had many tricks up their sleeves. It was not impossible to absorb the cold energy from the divine pond of ice and snow. However, they were not able to completely ignore the cold energy like Bailey Hongzhuang. When the 3 beasts saw that their master was so powerful, they felt proud of themselves. Lan Qingyan still dared to look down on master. This was definitely a blind dog. An impostor wants to be mentioned in the same breath as master. What a joke! Xiaohei said coldly. The more it saw Lan Qingyan, the deeper its disgust for her. In my opinion, Lan Qingyan probably still doesn't know master's identity. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to hold herself back. Xiao Bai's eyes flashed with wisdom. This Lan Qingyan was definitely not a person who didn't show her emotions on her face. If Lan Qingyan knew that master was most likely Lan Yixuan, she would have exploded long ago. Isn't this good? Wait until we get out of the divine ice snow pond. Lan Qingyan's expression will be even more interesting. Baisher sneered. Chapter 2692. Because Bailey Hongzhuang's actions were too shocking, Lan Qingyan and the Lan family's disciples were unable to regain their senses for a while. They completely did not know how Bailey Hongzhuang did this. Based on their family's many years of experience, they could only steadily absorb the energy. In comparison, Bailey Hongzhuang's absorption speed was much faster than theirs. After Lan Qingyan saw that Bailey Hongzhuang's absorption speed did not have any intention of slowing down, she could not help but turn her gaze to the latter's 3 contracted beasts. Bailey Hongzhuang actually only cared about her own cultivation and completely ignored her 3 contracted beasts. However, following Lan Qingyan's gaze, she discovered that Bailey Hongzhuang's 3 contracted beasts were floating on the divine ice snow pond very well and did not show any signs of being unable to withstand the cold. Most importantly, she even vaguely heard from the mouths of these 3 contracted beasts that they were mocking her. This discovery could not help but make Lan Qingyan burn with anger. The jealousy in her heart also became more intense. It was fine that Bailey Hongzhuang could do this, but Bailey Hongzhuang's 3 contracted beasts could actually withstand the cold. Wasn't this too strange? Logically speaking, the demonic beasts should not be able to withstand it. At this moment, Lan Qingyan also understood that Bailey Hongzhuang's 3 contracted beasts were not ordinary demonic beasts. It was extremely difficult for ordinary contracted beasts to raise their cultivation to this level. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's 3 contracted beasts had reached this level. Moreover, their spiritual intelligence was far from ordinary demonic beasts. This was enough to prove that they were not ordinary. As the young master of the Lan family, her foundation was actually not comparable to Bailey Hongzhuang's. Young master, what should we do? The 4 Lan family's disciples looked at Lan Qingyan. The situation before their eyes had completely exceeded their expectations. Lan Qingyan coldly glanced at the 4 of them and angrily rebuked. It's already like this, what else can we do? Think of a way to absorb more energy. Otherwise, it will affect your own future. After her voice fell, Lan Qingyan no longer paid attention to the 4 of them. This time, she had already thought of a way to deal with the divine pond of ice and snow. Just a few days ago, her father had taught her how to absorb the divine pond of ice and snow as quickly as possible. This method allowed him to ignore the cold and absorb the purest energy into his body. Originally, she wanted to use this method to surprise Bailey Hongzhuang, but she didn't expect that before she even started to use it, Bailey Hongzhuang had already surprised her. She had lost to Bailey Hongzhuang the last time. This time, she would not allow Bailey Hongzhuang to improve so much. The power of the divine pond of ice and snow belonged to the Lan family. They would never allow Bailey Hongzhuang to absorb as much as she wanted. Lan Qingyan's hands quietly flipped, forming a seal between her hands. Immediately after, the purplish color on Lan Qingyan's face quickly dissipated. The water in the divine ice pool was also continuously being drawn away by her. From beginning to end, she maintained the same hand seals. Feeling the abundant energy rushing into her body, Lan Qingyan felt a burst of joy in her heart. This was the feeling. An endless stream of energy was transforming her body, becoming a part of her body. After seeing Lan Qingyan also erupting with such a great attraction force, everyone's eyes were filled with surprise. It seems that Lan Qingyan was also prepared. Chapter 2693. Bailey Hongzhuang, who was absorbing the energy, naturally felt the movements from Lan Qingyan's side. However, she did not open her eyes. She did not care what method Lan Qingyan used to achieve this. The most important thing was to seize the opportunity to absorb the energy. After Bailey Hongzhuang and Lan Qingyan started their battle, the originally calm divine pond of ice and snow became uneven. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and Lan Qingyan were clearly in a state of confrontation. Both of them were equally matched. Astonishing energy washed over their bodies. Even though the divine pond of ice and snow was extremely rich in energy, everyone could still feel the speed of their absorption. Di Baichen and Mo Yunjue were not affected by the two at all. They continued to absorb the energy by themselves. Although they had certain methods, they still needed some time to adapt to the divine pond of ice and snow. Obviously, they would not be able to absorb as much energy as they wanted in such a short time. In comparison, the disciples of the Lan family did not have such a good mentality. Their strength could not be compared to Lan Qinyan and the others. To be able to obtain this opportunity was already a great opportunity for them. However, the current state of Lan Qinyan and Bailey Hongzhuang was too frightening. If the two of them continued to be in such a state, then they would not have much energy to absorb. At this moment, they could only hope that Bailey Hongzhuang's state was only temporary. For a moment, they did not dare to delay any longer. After all, it was good to absorb more energy. However, under such a state of mind, the four of them were somewhat nervous. Therefore, the effect of the absorption was not very good. Originally, the divine pond of ice and snow was only suitable for 6 cultivators to absorb energy at a time. However, Lan Qinyan and the others deliberately used some methods, so it became 8 people. Now, with the addition of Bailey Hongzhuang's 3 contracted beasts, it was almost conceivable that the energy in the divine pond of ice and snow would be completely absorbed in less than a month's time. On the other hand, Di Baichen and Mo Yunjue did not have any distracting thoughts. It was their first time coming into contact with the energy of the divine pond of ice and snow. Although the speed was slow in the beginning, as time passed, the speed would gradually increase. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the others entered the divine pond of ice and snow, Lan Hongtai returned to his residence as if nothing had happened. However, Lan Hongtai's appearance today gave Lan Jingquang and the others a different feeling. That damned old man, for him to come out at this time, it's obviously because of Bailey Hongzhuang. Judging from his attitude, he is warning us not to do anything to Bailey Hongzhuang. Lan Jingquang couldn't hide his anger. He was strong enough to become the head of the Lan family, but Lan Hongtai wouldn't let him. He didn't understand. As the patriarch, the most important thing was strength. Why would Lan Hongtai never acknowledge him? From the looks of it, the situation is troublesome. The great elder must have told the patriarch everything. I'm sure the patriarch's thoughts are the same as ours. He believes that Bailey Hongzhuang is Lan Yishuan. Lan Kaicheng's expression was extremely ugly. He and Lan Jingquang were already in the same boat. If there was a problem, he wouldn't be able to get out of it either. We have to quickly find evidence. Even if we don't have it, we can fake it. We have to prove that Bailey Hongzhuang and Lan Yishuan are not the same person. Chapter 2694. Blue Sun City. Si-Tu Yen and Mu Jin Se had been paying attention to the Lan family's movements and were prepared to support Bailey Hongzhuang at the slightest sign of movement. Hongzhuang and the rest have entered the divine pond of ice and snow. It looks like the situation is going more smoothly than we thought. Mu Jin Se's face was filled with a faint smile. Hongzhuang's methods were truly extraordinary. Although she had not attended the luncheon, she had heard the news from the Lan family and knew how stunning Bailey Hongzhuang's performance had been. There shouldn't be any problems in the divine pond of ice and snow. We'll just wait here for Ling Bing and the rest to arrive. Si-Tu Yen slowly said. Mu Jin Se nodded and a faint smile appeared on her face. However, a cold light flashed in the depths of her eyes. She had also met Yu Siqing in Blue Sun City. However, compared to Yu Siqing from 20 years ago, she had aged a lot. The moment she had seen Yu Siqing, she could no longer contain the hatred and murderous intent in her heart. However, now was not the time to show it, so she could only endure it. After so many years of torment, 3 generations of her family had all been destroyed by Yu Siqing's hands. Mu Jin Se's hatred towards Yu Siqing could not be described in a few words. It was a good thing that Hongzhuang had given her the rejuvenation pill after healing her. Now, she had regained her youthful appearance. When Yu Siqing saw that she was not disfigured, she would be very disappointed. At the same time, Yu Siqing was thinking of ways to concoct the strongest poison in her residence. She and Lan Jingquang were in the same boat. This Bailey Hongzhuang had humiliated her in front of everyone. If she did not take revenge, then she would not be her. This damned Bailey Hongzhuang. I don't know why, but I feel that she's a little familiar. Yu Siqing's mind raced as she concocted the poison. This feeling was very strange. She had clearly never seen this face before, but there was an inexplicable sense of familiarity. She had always believed in her intuition. If she felt that the face was familiar, then she should have seen it before. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Lan Qinyan let go of her hand that had been maintaining the hand seal. This hand seal also consumed a certain amount of her mental strength. Therefore, she needed to stop every few days to recover. However, when she stopped absorbing, she realized that Bailey Hongzhuang showed no signs of stopping. Originally, Lan Qinyan and Bailey Hongzhuang were evenly matched in the pool. But now that Lan Qinyan had stopped, Bailey Hongzhuang's side seemed to be the highest in the pool, almost hiding her whole body in the dense energy. Damn it! How did this Bailey Hongzhuang do it? She can actually keep absorbing energy for such a long time. Lan Qingyan's face was ashen. Her father had secretly taught her a secret technique before she was able to reach this stage. Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang also had a corresponding secret technique? Thousands of thoughts ran through her mind. Ever since this Bailey Hongzhuang appeared, her performance was extremely extraordinary. Moreover, her foundation also made her feel an indescribable sense of fear. Because Bailey Hongzhuang's performance was really too outstanding. In comparison, Bailey Hongzhuang had already overshadowed everyone's brilliance. Chapter 2695. During this period of time, she could already feel Bailey Hongzhuang's aura constantly increasing. Now that she was already at Blue Realm Level 9, it was obviously not easy to break through to the Purple Realm. On the contrary, she could not feel any signs of her bottleneck loosening. It was as hard as a rock. On the other hand, Bailey Hongzhuang's aura was increasing. If this continued, Bailey Hongzhuang would be able to enter Blue Realm Level 9 in a few days. In this way, the gap between her and Bailey Hongzhuang would completely disappear. With the help of her father, she was able to increase her strength to this level. However, Bailey Hongzhuang actually used their Lan family's divine ice lake to directly break through to Blue Realm Level 9. This was a bit too ironic. Bailey Hongzhuang, who was cultivating, naturally heard Lan Qingyan's words. However, she did not take it to heart. Evidently, Lan Qingyan could no longer keep up her pretense of calmness. Long before she came to the Lan family, her father had already told her that the Lan family had owned the divine ice lake for so many years. They had a certain amount of experience in absorbing the energy from the divine ice lake. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang did not find it strange that Lan Qinyan had a way to quickly absorb the energy. However, this kind of secret method required a certain amount of mental strength. Therefore, Lan Qinyan could not maintain it all the time. There would definitely be a time to slow down. In comparison, she was surprised that a heaven-defying mental cultivation method could have such an effect. More than that, she was pleasantly surprised. She wanted to use the power of the divine ice lake to defeat Lan Qinyan. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang did not pay any attention to her, Lan Qinyan could not hide her anger. Bailey Hongzhuang, don't pretend that you didn't hear me. At this time, Di Beichen slowly opened his eyes. His extraordinarily handsome face slowly wrinkled into a frown, and between his eyebrows emerged a bit of impatience and disgust. Young Master Lan, since we've come to the divine ice lake, we'll rely on our own abilities. My wife has the ability to absorb the energy. Is there a problem? After interacting with Lan Qinyan for a period of time, Di Beichen had a certain understanding of Lan Qingyan's pestering character. However, Lan Qingyan's words were undoubtedly to delay Bailey Hongzhuang's time. Lan Qingyan was stunned for a moment when she saw the undisguised disgust in Di Beichen eyes. Even though she already knew that Di Beichen liked Bailey Hongzhuang, she still felt an indescribable throbbing in her heart when faced with such a handsome face. After all, she had never admired a man so much in all these years. Therefore, in the face of Di Beichen's criticism and protection of Bailey Hongzhuang, Lan Qingyan was even more unhappy. For her to suddenly absorb energy so quickly, it doesn't make sense. She must be using some shady means, Lan Qingyan said with a cold face. Shady means? Di Beichen's lips curled into an evil arc. As far as I know, young Master Lan also used a special method to absorb energy. Could it be that this is also a shady means? That's my Lan family's secret method. The divine ice lake is my Lan family's property. It's normal for me to know a secret method. Everyone has their own methods. You have the Lan family's secret method. My wife naturally has her own methods. Chapter 2696. Seeing that Di Beichen was so protective of Bailey Hongzhuang, Lan Qingyan's face turned ashen. She didn't know what kind of bewitching methods Bailey Hongzhuang used on Di Beichen and Mo Yunjue to make them so loyal to her. Di Beichen was fine, but Mo Yunjue was also the same. Especially when she recalled Mo Yunjue's disdainful look towards her, Lan Qingyan couldn't help but feel angry. In the eyes of Mo Yunjue and Di Beichen, it was as if she and Bailey Hongzhuang were completely different. The divine ice pond belongs to my Lan family. It's normal for me to have a secret technique. Bailey Hongzhuang is only here for the first time, but she's absorbing energy so wantonly. There must be something strange. Lan Qingyan didn't give up. Her gaze turned towards Bailey Hongzhuang, who was still cultivating with her eyes closed. Bailey Hongzhuang, don't pretend that you didn't hear anything. It's meaningless. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang slowly opened her eyes and looked straight at the aggressive Lan Qingyan. What do you want to say? Bailey Hongzhuang lazily glanced at Lan Qingyan and went straight to the point. Lan Qingyan was slightly stunned. Then, with a cold face, she said, I don't care what kind of methods you usually use. But in my Lan family's territory, it's better for you to keep these methods to yourself. According to what you said, only you can use secret techniques here. We can't use our own methods? I've always heard that young Master Lan is extremely overbearing. Now, it seems that this degree of overbearingness is far beyond my imagination. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a mocking smile. Lan Qingyan really inherited her parents' fine tradition. She learned the word jealousy incisively and vividly. Hearing this, Lan Qingyan's expression turned even uglier. I don't believe that you have any legitimate means to absorb energy so quickly. It must be some unorthodox method. If you use such a method to affect the divine pond of ice and snow of my Lan clan, what should we do? Your words are too far-fetched. Bailey Hongzhuang sneered. How I absorb energy is just a method. What does it have to do with the pool water? If you continue to be so unreasonable, then don't blame me for being rude. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes blossomed with a sharp and ruthless light, as if it could pierce through the heart of Lan Qingyan. With the help of this pool of water, she would be able to break through to Blue Realm 9th level in a few days. If Lan Qingyan continued to disturb her here, it would be very detrimental to her advancement. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang actually dared to threaten her, Lan Qingyan couldn't help but be stunned. Her entire body was suffocating with anger. This was the Lan family. Bailey Hongzhuang actually dared to threaten her in the Lan family's territory? Wasn't this a little too lawless? Bailey Hongzhuang, don't be too arrogant. In the next moment, Lan Qingyan slapped the pool water and looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a burning gaze. The elemental energy in her body had already burst out. However, without waiting for Bailey Hongzhuang to make a move, Di Beichen and Mo Yunjue's elemental energy fluctuations had already surged out at the same time. Two cold rays of light shot out from their pitch-black pupils. Both of them coldly looked at Lan Qinyan. It was clearly Lan Qinyan who snatched away everything that should have belonged to Bailey Hongzhuang. Now, Lan Qinyan was still here, unforgiving. Comparing the two, Bailey Hongzhuang was really much better than Lan Qinyan. Chapter 2697. This woman really thinks that she's so great. Xiao Hei's figure rapidly grew as she looked at Lan Qinyan with an unfriendly gaze. Whether it was quantity or quality, their side was not inferior to Lan Qinyan at all. Lan Qinyan, consider it carefully. Once you make a move, you'll be the one at a disadvantage. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was cold. She came to the Lan family with the intention of shedding all pretense of cordiality. There was no need for her to have any misgivings. Even if they were to fight in this divine ice pond and turn the world upside down, she would not be the least bit afraid. After all, her maternal grandparents were now in Blue Sun City. She had already made full preparations for coming here this time. Moreover, Lan Hongtai's performance at that time had proven many things. Lan Qinyan and the four Lan family disciples saw Bailey Hongzhuang's arrogant and fearless appearance and could not help but feel indignant at the injustice. In their Lan family's territory, this was the first time an outsider dared to be so arrogant. Bailey Hongzhuang, are you so sure that the one at a disadvantage is me? Lan Qinyan's eyes were cold as she pointed at the surroundings and raised her voice. You better look carefully. This is my Lan family. Ha ha. Bailey Hongzhuang sneered. It seems that you still don't understand why the Lan family elders have such strange expressions when they see me. Now that they had entered the divine ice pond, once they entered, they would be sealed for a month. During this period, the Lan family members would not easily enter. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang did not care if Lan Qinyan knew her identity or not. After hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Lan Qinyan, who was originally unable to restrain her anger, could not help but change her expression. This was what she did not understand the most. Lan Qinyan's gaze was fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang. Her voice was tinged with seriousness as she said, "Do you know why?" Bailey Hongzhuang's phoenix eyes slightly raised. "Of course, don't you think we're very fated?" Very fated. It was just an ill-fated relationship. This time, she had come to sever this ill-fated relationship. Hearing this, Lan Qinyan's expression became even stranger. She didn't know why, but looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's confident appearance, her heart had a bad premonition. She had never seen Bailey Hongzhuang before, and the first time Bailey Hongzhuang appeared in the Lan family, she was able to cause such a commotion in the Lan family. This was really a little too strange. Thinking of this, Lan Qinyan couldn't help but look at the four people beside her. She wanted to know if they had heard anything. However, the four of them shook their heads. They knew nothing about this. Bailey Hongzhuang, stop keeping us in suspense. What do you know? If you have the ability, just say it. This feeling of being kept in the dark made Lan Qinyan very angry. Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang knew about their Lan family's matters but she didn't? Bailey Hongzhuang shrugged and chuckled. Why are you in such a hurry? You will know after you finish cultivating in the divine pond of ice and snow. It's very exciting. Just wait and see. The degree of excitement of this good show might exceed everyone's expectations. She knew that Lan Jingquang and the others must have launched a frantic investigation on her. However, the results of this investigation might not be satisfactory. After all, an unprepared person would never be able to defeat a prepared person. Chapter 2698. This feeling was as if a huge conspiracy was unfolding right in front of her. However, she didn't understand it at all. She just stood there blankly, waiting for everything to swallow her up. At this moment, Lan Qinyan only felt that Bailey Hongzhuang in front of her was somewhat unfathomable. However, even if she racked her brains, she still couldn't figure out where the problem was. Bailey Hongzhuang had never had any interaction with the Lan family. This feeling made her extremely uncomfortable. However, Bailey Hongzhuang wasn't willing to say it out loud. The originally hostile atmosphere gradually dissipated after Lan Qingyan's mystery. In fact, Lan Qingyan also understood that if it weren't for Bailey Hongzhuang's 3 contracted beasts, they would still have a certain chance of winning in a 4 versus 3 battle. However, she had already seen the battle prowess of these 3 contracted beasts. Moreover, after such a long time, these 3 contracted beasts' strength must have improved to a certain extent. Once they fought, with the 3 contracted beasts harassing them, it would be difficult for them to win. It was a pity that only so many people could enter the divine ice pond. Otherwise, she would definitely teach Bailey Hongzhuang a good lesson here. However, she wasn't in a hurry now. As long as she left the divine ice pond, she would still have a chance. Seeing that Lan Qingyan had obediently shut her mouth, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't bicker with Lan Qingyan anymore. She closed her eyes and continued to cultivate. The power of the divine ice pond was extremely beneficial to the body. The more she could absorb, the more benefits she would gain in the future. Di Baichen and Mo Yunjue also began to cultivate again. Based on the current situation, Lan Qingyan wouldn't be able to make any wave. The divine ice pond once again regained its tranquility. Only the sound of subtle breathing and the rippling of the pond water could be heard. Have you noticed Jing Kuang's recent actions? Lan Hongtai turned around and looked at Lan Borong behind him. His voice was low and hoarse. Master Kuang has been investigating Bailey Hongzhuang's background and identity. Second Elder and the others are also becoming more and more diligent in buying people's hearts. Previously, Master Kuang had planned to wait for young Lord to return from the Battle of Zhuolu before recommending young Lord as the family head. However, due to the poor results, he temporarily gave up. Right now, Master Kuang is probably feeling threatened, so he chose to speed up. Lan Borong slowly told Lan Hongtai what he had learned recently. In the past, Lan Hongtai didn't care about the family's affairs. Even if Lan Jing was trying to buy people's hearts, Lan Borong didn't care when Lan Hongtai mentioned it. In fact, Lan Hongtai had long wanted to put down the family matters and rest in peace. If the family head position was handed over to Lan Qingyan, he was also willing. However, now that the situation had changed, he took the initiative to care about these things. As expected, he can't hold back anymore. Lan Hongtai chuckled and shook his head. Originally, he thought he didn't know Lan Jingquang at all. But after so many years, he understood Lan Jingquang's attitude. Power was something Lan Jingquang could never let go of. Perhaps it was because of this that Lan Yunxiao's cultivation was always stronger than Lan Jingquang's. Because Lan Jing was too distracted. Not only that, Yu Siqing has also recently entered seclusion. Every day, she is secretly researching something in her room. No one can see her. Chapter 2699. Hearing Lan Borong's words, Lan Hongtai couldn't help but slap the table. His calm face also showed a trace of anger. It's the same trick again. Yu Siqing is truly a troublemaker. Back then, it was Yu Siqing who came up with such a sinister plan to harm Lan Yunxiao's family. Now, Lan Jingquang was colluding with Yu Siqing. Based on his understanding of Lan Jingquang, he must have made up his mind to end Bailey Hongzhuang once and for all. In Lan Jingquang's heart, familial love had always been extremely thin. Anyone who tried to stop him from obtaining power would be dealt with by him. Even his own father, in his eyes, was probably looking forward to an early death. What happened in the past was already the greatest pain in his heart. If Lan Jingquang dared to do such a despicable thing again, he wouldn't tolerate it any longer. Family head, if that's really the case, then we have to be more careful. Lan Borong frowned. Yu Siqing's poisoning methods were truly impossible to guard against. The slightest carelessness could lead to them falling into her trap. Back then, they'd suffered such a loss. Lan Hongtai nodded. Send people to pay attention to the movements over there. Don't let anyone find out. That incident had happened last time because they hadn't set up any defenses. Now that Lan Jingquang wanted to use the same trick again, he wouldn't give him the slightest chance. Limitless Palace Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing were cultivating day and night. The two of them abandoned all distracting thoughts and focused all their attention on cultivation. Perhaps to ordinary people, cultivating day and night was unspeakably dry and arduous, but to them it was something they wanted to endure. Compared to the years of torture they'd endured, being able to properly cultivate now was their greatest wish. Moreover, they were about to appear before those fellows with a brand new face. This was their greatest motivation now. Counting the days, Hong Zhuang and the others should have entered the divine ice lake by now. Nangong Wu's face rippled with a faint smile. When she first met Bailey Hongzhuang, it was still too early to plan. But now, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart was already in motion. According to the information we received, Hong Zhuang wasn't bullied in the Lan family. On the contrary, Yu Siqing and Lan Jingquang lost face in front of her. Sect Master Situ and Palace Master Mu didn't even appear, and the matter was resolved. Yu Linfeng's eyes were brimming with admiration. In recent years, Bailey Hongzhuang had become more mature. Everything was within her plan. To be able to reach this step at such a young age was truly amazing. In comparison, the gap between ordinary cultivators and Bailey Hongzhuang at her age was probably a huge chasm. Lan Qinyan originally wanted to use the Lan family's power to teach her a lesson. She didn't expect Hong Zhuang to be so overbearing that she couldn't even say a word. In the past, I've always heard of how outstanding Lan Qinyan was. But in my opinion, Lan Qinyan can't compare to Hong Zhuang. Nangong Wu's voice was filled with disdain. In the past, when everyone praised Lan Qinyan, she didn't care. But now that there was a comparison, there was no need to say anything more about Lan Qinyan. Hong Zhuang's experience since young was different from Lan Qinyan's. Naturally, her way of dealing with things is much better than Lan Qinyan. Chapter 2700. At the Divine Pond of Ice and Snow. A powerful energy fluctuation suddenly came from the compound, causing Di Beichen and the others who were cultivating to open their eyes and look at the source of the energy fluctuation. They saw Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were closed and the cold pond water around her was boiling. However, this was not due to the increase in temperature, but Bailey Hongzhuang's rapid absorption of energy. Seeing this, Di Beichen, Mo Yunjue, and the three beasties were all delighted. Hong Zhuang is about to break through. Di Beichen's lips curved into a faint smile. They had only been in the divine ice altar for 7 days, but Bailey Hongzhuang was able to break through from level 8 Blue Realm to level 9 Blue Realm. Her cultivation speed was really fast. Master is really amazing. Lan Qinyan has been cultivating for several days without any progress, but Master has already successfully broken through. In this way, Master is now in the same realm as Lan Qinyan. Xiao Hei's eyes flashed with excitement. Lan Qinyan had always felt that her cultivation was higher than Master's, so she was very proud. Now that Master had caught up in such a short time, Lan Qinyan had nothing to be proud of. Their cultivation has reached the same realm, but Lan Qinyan's combat strength is definitely incomparable to Master's. I'm looking forward to the end of the cultivation in the Divine Pond of Ice and Snow. Once we get out, it will be really exciting. Xiao Bai's face was filled with an attitude of wanting to see the world in chaos. This kind of good show was something that he had been looking forward to for a long time. Compared to Di Beichen and the others' happiness, Lan Qinyan's face became extremely ugly. She had already expected that Bailey Hongzhuang would be able to break through to level 9 Blue Realm with the help of the Divine Pond of Ice and Snow, but this speed was still somewhat beyond her expectations. All along, with the help of the Rainbow Sacred Pearl, her cultivation talent was much stronger than ordinary cultivators. However, after meeting Bailey Hongzhuang, she felt that Bailey Hongzhuang's breakthrough speed was really terrifying. Thinking back to the Battle of Zhuolu, Bailey Hongzhuang's cultivation was much lower than hers by several levels. At that time, it was not difficult for her to kill Bailey Hongzhuang. Now, facing Bailey Hongzhuang again, she no longer had the same confidence as before. This breakthrough speed was not only her, but also Di Beichen and Mo Yunjue could not be compared to Bailey Hongzhuang. Could it be that when Bailey Hongzhuang broke through, she didn't consider the impact of a rapid breakthrough on her foundation? Lan Qingyan's mind was constantly pondering. If this was the case, then it would be the best. However, judging from Bailey Hongzhuang's fighting strength, this possibility was obviously not high. The other 4 disciples of the Lan family also had extremely ugly expressions. During this period, they had been desperately absorbing the energy. Not to mention that their cultivation speed could not keep up with Bailey Hongzhuang and Lan Qingyan. Di Beichen and Mo Yunjue's cultivation speed could not be kept up with. The most speechless thing was that they could only compete with these 3 contracted beasts. This was really too depressing. It was already very miraculous that contracted beasts could absorb the energy of the divine pond of ice and snow. However, these 3 contracted beasts could cultivate so easily, which made people even more speechless. Compared to the confidence they had before entering the divine pond of ice and snow, the current situation really gave Lan Qingyan and the others a resounding slap. Chapter 2701. Boom! The water from the divine pond of ice and snow suddenly surged up and surrounded Bailey Hongzhuang, stirring up waves. Everyone's gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang's aura had successfully reached Blue Realm Level 9. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly opened her eyes and a smile slowly appeared on her lip. Sure enough, I've successfully broken through. Thinking back to the time when she broke through so quickly, she had been controlling it these days. She didn't want the rapid progress to affect her foundation. However, after absorbing the power of the divine pond of ice and snow, she didn't have to worry anymore. This was because the power of the divine pond of ice and snow could remove the impurities in a cultivator's body and dantian. Turning her head, Bailey Hongzhuang saw Di Beichen and Mo Yunjue's joyful smiles. I've finally caught up to your progress. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a smile. Your progress is too fast. If we don't work hard, I'm afraid we'll be left behind by you in the future. Mo Yunjue joked. Wife, congratulations. Di Beichen's face was also full of smiles. Bailey Hongzhuang's progress was really delightful. Lan Qingyan looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with an unfriendly gaze. The divine pond of ice and snow of the Lan family had helped Bailey Hongzhuang break through to Blue Realm Level 9. Thinking about it, she felt it was very ironic. Bailey Hongzhuang turned her gaze to Lan Qingyan. In fact, Lan Qingyan's burning gaze was really hard to ignore. Young Master Lan, the power of the divine pond of ice and snow is really magical. This time, I've really benefited from the Lan family. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a playful smile as she spoke slowly. Hearing this, Lan Qingyan's face couldn't help but turn cold. She was already extremely unhappy, but now she was extremely depressed. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's smiling face, Lan Qingyan felt that there was nothing more disgusting than this face. Unfortunately, there was nothing she could do to Bailey Hongzhuang. In the next moment, Lan Qingyan angrily closed her eyes. The only thing she was better than Bailey Hongzhuang in was her cultivation. If her cultivation was also caught up by Bailey Hongzhuang, then she really had no right to be proud. Bailey Hongzhuang, Di Beichen, and the others looked at each other. After revealing a smile of understanding, they went back into seclusion. During this month, they needed to work hard to break through to the Purple Realm, so they didn't want to waste any time. During this period of time, Di Beichen and Mo Yunjue had already overcome the chill of the divine pond of ice and snow. Their speed of absorbing energy was gradually increasing. Although there was still a gap between them and Bailey Hongzhuang and Lan Qingyan, who used a secret technique, this gap wasn't too big. However, breaking through to the Purple Realm wasn't an easy task. The time it took was also much longer than breaking through to the Purple Realm. 20 days passed in the blink of an eye. As the end of the day approached, the atmosphere in the divine pond of ice and snow became more and more solemn. Breaking through the bottleneck of the purple realm was really too difficult. Even after absorbing so much energy, it was still not enough for everyone to break through. The energy in the pond water was much weaker than before. It could be seen that there wasn't much energy left in the divine pond of ice and snow. Now, it could be said that this place was unusually quiet. Both sides didn't talk at all and began to race against time. Chapter 2702. There was still a certain gap between the three beasts and Bailey Hongzhuang. With the abundant energy in the divine pond of ice, their breakthroughs were also extremely fast. While Bailey Hongzhuang and Lan Qinyan were fighting, the three beasts were also competing to see who could increase their strength the most in the same amount of time. Therefore, the three beasts were also very happy. Once one of them broke through, the other two would also break through. Lan Qinyan and the others were completely speechless at this situation. Bailey Hongzhuang was already so abnormal, but they didn't expect that even Bailey Hongzhuang's contracted beasts were also so abnormal. Without thinking, it was certain that Bailey Hongzhuang was the one who gained the most from the divine pond of ice this time. Bailey Hongzhuang not only broke through to the 9th level of the Blue Realm, but Bailey Hongzhuang's three contracted beasts also had a great increase in strength. At the same time, the three cultivators of the Lan family also successfully broke through. Outside the divine pond of ice, there were people from the Lan family guarding it every day. They were very familiar with the aura of breakthroughs coming from inside. So far, no one has broken through to the purple realm? Lan Jingquang asked the guard. Based on the secret technique he had taught Lan Qinyan must have absorbed the most energy. If someone broke through to the purple realm, Lan Qinyan should be the first. The guard nodded. There are other auras of breakthroughs, but there are no signs of anyone breaking through to the purple realm. Hearing this, Lan Jingquang frowned. Whether Lan Qinyan could break through to the purple realm this time was also very important. Master Kuang, with the young master's cultivation talent, she can definitely break through to the purple realm. Lan Kaiqing spoke slowly, but there was a trace of worry in the depths of his eyes. She must break through to the purple realm. Only then can we have a reason to propose for her to take the position of the family head. Lan Jingquang's face was gloomy. His dark and malicious eyes flickered with anxiety and annoyance. Now that Lan Hongtai had begun to watch his every move, this feeling made him very unhappy. As long as Lan Qinyan worked hard and ascended to the position of clan head, then he would have nothing to fear. Master Kuang, you've already taught the young master the secret technique. Most of the energy in the divine pond of ice and snow will be absorbed by the young master. It should be enough for him to break through to the purple realm. Logically speaking, this kind of secret technique was generally not taught because there was a certain level of fairness between the Lan family's disciples. However, the current situation was different from before, so they used it. That Bailey Hongzhuang is very strange, and Di Baichen and Mo Yunjia are not easy to deal with either. No one can say for sure what will happen. Lan Jingquang was obviously not as optimistic as Lan Kaiqing thought. Judging from Bailey Hongzhuang's attitude when she came to the Lan family, he felt that Bailey Hongzhuang did not come with good intentions. With their status, it's not strange for them to have such means. However, we are the most familiar with the divine pond of ice and snow. Hearing this, Lan Jingquang nodded and said to the guard, "If anyone breaks through to the purple realm, inform me immediately." Yes. However, not long after Lan Jingquang left, Lan Borong also came to the divine pond of ice and asked the same question. Lin Feng, thank you so much for these days. Chapter 2703. Ever since he took the rejuvenation pill, Lan Yunxiao's appearance had returned to that of a 20-year-old. Just like when he was in high spirits in the Lan family, an outstanding temperament was evident in every part of his body. Yu Linfeng looked at the glowing Lan Yunxiao and felt as if he had returned to 20 years ago. Back then, it was this Lan Yunxiao who had given him the only warmth in the cold and heartless Lan family. Now that he thought about it, he was filled with emotion. If it wasn't for you back then, I would have lost my life. Being able to help you now is already something that makes me very happy. Why should I thank you? Yu Linfeng's face was filled with a spring breeze smile. He had always felt that someone like Yu Linfeng should be an all-powerful existence. More than 10 years of torture had left many scars in Lan Yunxiao's heart, but he felt that the Lan Yunxiao in front of him now had an indescribable temperament and determination compared to 19 years ago. What I did back then was nothing more than a slight effort. Now that you're helping me, it's incomparable to what I did back then. Lan Yunxiao shook his head. With his power in the Lan family back then, it would have been easy for him to protect Yu Linfeng's life. However, Yu Linfeng was risking a certain amount of risk to help him. In comparison, Yu Linfeng was truly sending charcoal in snowy weather. What you're feeling now is exactly what I felt back then. Since you treat me as a brother, then there's no need for such pleasantries. When we go to Blue Sun City this time, you must take back everything that belongs to you. Help me teach Lan Jingquang a lesson while you're at it. Yu Linfeng was full of smiles, and his voice revealed a carefree and heroic feeling. To him, the Lan family was already a thing of the past. He didn't care about it anymore because he didn't have any feelings for the Lan family to begin with. However, Lan Yunxiao was different. The Lan family was Lan Yunxiao's home. There were too many things that Lan Yunxiao couldn't bear to part with there. Don't worry. My so-called brother should also be punished. Lan Yunxiao's eyes gradually sharpened with a hidden sharpness. From her crazy love with Lan Jing, to the shocking betrayal, to the final torture and humiliation. If he hadn't been able to see Lan Jingquang's true colors back then, now he had seen through everything. He couldn't forgive Lan Jingquang because once he did, he would be letting down all the pain he'd endured all these years. He would also be letting down Mu Lingbing and Yishuan. Noticing the change in Lan Yunxiao's expression, Yu Linfeng suddenly understood that the current Lan Yunxiao was different from 20 years ago. He was still as elegant and refined as before. However, compared to his previous benevolence, there was now a hint of ruthlessness and decisiveness. And such a change was definitely not a bad thing. If Lan Yunxiao had been this ruthless back then, he wouldn't have been persecuted to this extent by Lan Jingquang. Mu Lingbing and Nangong Wu stood together, gazing at the lush greenery at the foot of the mountain, their hearts filled with indescribable emotions. After so many years, she was finally going to head to Blue Sun City again. Lingbing, you have to take care of yourself on this trip. Nangong Wu's face was full of smiles, her eyes brimming with blessings. Hong Zhuang is already waiting for you in Blue Sun City. I'm afraid the Lan family is about to experience a great upheaval,